Bringing greetings on behalf of myself and our amazing Board of Education, who you see here. Next slide, please. And then always reminding you all that in addition to my joining these meetings, as well as our Assistant Superintendent, Pauline Philansby, and Emily Mayer, who is the Executive Director of Business Services, we oftentimes have a number of BUSD district level staff who are present at these meetings, either because they will present information or because if there are questions that you have, they'll be here to answer. I do want to introduce another new member to our team whose picture is not on this slide, so forgive me, but she is now joining us as the new Director of State and Federal and Special Projects. And did she leave? Her name is Jessica Bonduras Kaplan.
Right
so Jessica, unmute. There you are. Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. So wonderful to be here with all of you.
And we are not just welcoming Jessica to this meeting, we're welcoming her to BUSD as her first day on the job was Monday. And just, who she is and what she does, that's a whole nother story. But in regards to budgeting and thinking about resource allocation here in Berkeley, a key part of Jessica's role is really working with our categorical or restricted dollars. And even though we know that this committee has purview over the unrestricted general fund, there'll be a lot of information that Jessica will get from the conversations that we're having, but also a lot of information she can offer as we think about how to rethink the resource allocation given the context that we're in right now. Next slide. Reminding us around our responsibilities as members in terms of the protocol to engage in this meeting. Our chat is on, but we do ask that the chat is only used by voting members of the committee. If you are a public member of the public or a person who is not who's non-voting member, it is the public comments time. That is your time to make comments or share information. For those who are voting members, we also still do ask that you use the chat really to focus on whatever agenda item or topic is at hand. And as you know, though you can use the chat, you can also just unmute or raise your hand to engage with staff or the larger committee directly around any of the agenda items. Next slide, please. And the next slide. And the one after that. You remember our roles and responsibilities. We have a lot to cover today, y'all, so I'm going to go really quickly. We're grounding us in our mission around providing academic excellence and making sure our babies can make positive contributions to the world across the diversity, and then, of course, our 4 E's. Let's jump right into our agenda. So, again, it's a meaty agenda today. We have our regular 90 minutes, and we're going to see and hope that we can cover all of this in that time. We are now passing our welcoming moves. We're going to get a governor's budget update. You might recall that a couple meetings ago, Pauline provided information about the governor's budget. We have a little bit more information, including information about a block grant allocation and how that block grant might potentially impact our targets or our budget balancing scenarios. We will also spend some time, as always, thinking about how we're going to move towards the target that we have set, and that will include a quick review of the proposals that we brought to you at the last meeting, or the considerations that we brought. We call those phase 1. We will also be bringing to you this afternoon some additional budget balancing proposals or considerations. I want to remind us all that at this point, everything that we discuss, even the things that we bring to you all as staff, are at this point just proposals or things for us to consider. No decisions are made or have been made to date, nor will there be any decisions made as a result of our time together this afternoon. So we'll bring to you some of our newest ideas for how to move towards that target, as well as revisit some revenue generators, including transportation, but also bring to you some other new revenue generators that we would like this committee to consider. And then, as always, we try our best to make sure that you can be informed partners. And so if there are questions that you have or information that you seek, we have our time of the agenda called Aligning Around Key Data Points and Details, where we bring you that information. And so for today's meeting, though there's tons of things you've asked about, what we are going to be responding to is giving you information about our BUSD contracts. Those are both our special education contracts as well as other contracts. We won't go into detail about what each contract is or what it's for, of course, because that's a much lengthier conversation. We will be able to answer that very first question that you all have asked, which is how much does BUSD spend on contracts, and what are the various contractors that we partner with. We'll also be answering a question that you all had at the last meeting around the LEAP program, which is specifically a Berkeley High School program. And even though it is specific to Berkeley High School, of course, it has budget implications that it is relevant for this committee to consider. And then we will do you a reminder around the March 15th notices that we shared at the last meeting and what the implications are for the reduction in force. business. And then we'll close up our meeting and go into next steps. So with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Vivian to go to the next slide, which is just our reminder slide that we are definitely in and moving through stormy weather, but we know that stormy weather in itself is not a bad thing. It's being unprepared for the weather that causes issue. And so our work together as a SBAC is to prepare ourselves as best as possible to navigate and to brace ourselves for the reduction in budget that we know is forthcoming, while still moving towards our district mission, reminding us also that even as we have these conversations, they will be difficult and hard because there is oftentimes no one solution. And for every decision that we make together as a committee, there will likely be a trade-off. So wanting to just really ground ourselves in that fact. With that, I'm going to transition to Pauline. Look at that, at 3:10. I'm going to transition to Pauline for us to give her to give the first part of the agenda, which is the update on the governor's budget and information about the Black Grant. Pauline? Daniel?
Sorry, can somebody just make this deck shareable? I don't have access to it. It's
Sorry,
attached
okay.
to the email, but I just can't access it.
I'll let Pauline start, Daniel, and I'll do that in the chat. Except I don't know where Pauline is. Pauline? Well, that's
I'm here. I was on mute. I was on mute. I'm talking.
I'm here. Go ahead, Pauline.
Sorry, guys. I was on mute. So as Anika mentioned, we do have a little bit more information on the governor's budget. This was based on a CBO meeting that we had at Alameda County Office of Ed, or ACOE, and they provided additional information as well as additional guidance in terms of information that was in the governor's budget, but now they have a little bit more details. So let's go to the next slide. So Anika mentioned the block grant. I had mentioned it when I did the governor's budget, but now we have an idea of how much funding this block grant is going to generate. But before we get too excited, we're advised not to score it against the target, but it's going to be about $3 million for Berkeley Unified School District. And this is largely it's largely unrestricted. So one of the caveats that they have that this grant can be used for is for increasing expenses. But of course, they're still kind of trying to get more details on the grant. So even though that's $3 million that can be potentially scored towards our target, we're advised not to book it at this time. So next slide.
Pauline, can you just really quickly clarify who advised that we not book it so that our community can know?
Alameda County Office of Ed, as well as school services, who we rely on for a lot of our data and our assumptions for constructing the budget.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, this came from a meeting that I had at Alameda County Office of Ed. So another thing that I had mentioned earlier was a TK add-on. I had mentioned it when I did the governor's budget, the $0.8 million. So that amount may change as well, but that's another potential additional revenue coming in from the governor's budget. Next slide. So the total revenue, we're looking at $3.8 million that could be counted towards our target. So unfortunately, as I mentioned, for the block grant, the ACOE, or Alameda County Office of Ed, and school services, they are concerned that there may be additional restrictions with this grant, and there may actually be an allocation based on unduplicated pupil count. And because our unduplicated pupil count is 30%, we don't know how we may be impacted. And then they're also concerned about the allocation that the governor is proposing in light of the LA fires. So a lot of caution around this additional, the $3 million for the block grant. And in addition, the DK add-on was supposed to be a correction on the governor's side. And there's some thinking that this correction may be overstated. So $3.8 million is great. Unfortunately, at this point, we can't score it towards the target. So on the next slide, Vivian. So this is just a caveat that we got from Vicky. Just hold on a second. Let me just get to the next section and then we can take questions. So this is the caveat again, advice from School Services and Alameda County Office of Ed include the impact of the COLA reduction, and on the others, they're advising that we develop some sort of a plan, internal planning, but don't count it towards our target at this point. Yes, Vicky?
I was just confirming that if at some point we decide to count it, it's a one-time grant, so we would then have to move those
No.
cuts into next year.
It's a block grant. It's ongoing.
It would be ongoing. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
but
okay.
as we get more information, we'll share it with you.
Okay.
So in light of this windfall, any other questions before I move on? So in light of this $3.8 million, we thought we could do a two-prong approach. We had the next slide, Vivian, please. So as a reminder, our target that we had before the governor's budget was 7.6 ongoing and an additional 0.2 in 26-27. The COLA we know is we're gonna lose funding of $500,000 for the COLA, which is going to increase our target to 8.1 and 8.3. And that's the 0.8 that we had talked about with the LCFF add-on. But at what I had recommended when we presented the governor's budget, that we were not changing the target at this time because we know that 0.5 reduction may be offset by additional funding. So we thought, yes.
I have a question in terms of, was any indication regarding timing of when they would run districts?
Yeah, so a lot of information came out in the trailer bill in February. So that's what they shared with us. That's why we know the amount that we would be getting that we'll be getting per ADA. But in terms of any further, like when can we include it, we don't know at this point. So what we thought we would look at, what if we included the COLA as recommended, and then what if we looked at including even half of the increased revenue from the governor's budget. So if we look at the next slide please. So here we are, we have the target that we had before. We know about the COLA. So even if we took half of the $3 million block grant and half of the LCFF funding, our target would look like 6.2 million and 6.4 million. That's the middle ground. And then the best case scenario on the next slide, Vivian. What if we got all of the 3 million and the 0.8? Our target that we'll be looking at will be 4.3 million and 4.5. So our target is actually ranging from 4.3 to 7.6 at this point. So we're doing an A, B, and a C scenario and planning accordingly and making proposals accordingly. And that's the best that we can do at this time based on the information and the advice from both the Alameda County Office of Ed as well as our school services. I see Daniel has his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand that. You're saying there's an A, B, and C scenario. So if the A is a scenario where we get no funding and C is the scenario where we get all the funding, would the items that are cut in C differ than the items that are cut in A? Are these different plans or these priorities?
I'm proposing that we will rank whatever proposals we come up with. So we'll probably rank them in like $500,000 tranches, or we will tier them. Like this is the tier 1 if the target is X amount. This is tier 2 if the target is X amount, and this is tier 3 if the target is X amount.
Yeah. So,
And
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What were you saying?
I spoke too soon, so I'm taking back my
Right.
comment to finish.
Okay, so so we have done this in the past where we kind of had $500,000 pockets or sections, and then we would say, well, you know, this is the first 500 that we will do the second 500. So once we get all our suggestions, we can then rank them and group them and prioritize them. But in full transparency, we know there's more revenue. In former years, whatever was in the governor's budget, and as we had dollar amounts, we would adjust our target. But because this is a very uncertain funding cycle in terms of challenges that the state has, this is, I think, this is probably the second time that they told us to kind of like be very conservative and be very concerned about any additional funding. So what they are saying is that we should recognize the COLA, which would increase the targets by $500,000. But because we know that we're going to be getting some amount of additional funding, we're keeping it at the original target that we had, the 7.6 and the 7.8.
Two things, Pauline. One
Yeah.
is I know we need to make a correction on this slide that's on the screen. The top says 100% of governor's recommendation in millions, but then on the side it still has block grant at 50%. And so we know this is the slide showing block grant at 100%, and the previous slide is block grant at 50%. So we'll make sure to make that correction. It just was when you were making the copy, it didn't cross over. So I want to make sure people are clear about that. The other thing, Pauline, is there's a couple of questions. Okay. Couple questions in the chat, just asking for clarification. So typically grants are for a particular time frame, y'all, and are not forever. However, this one is not however, and this one is going to be allocated over a number of years. And so, Pauline, the question in the chat is just a little bit of confusion, because when Vicki asked you, is this ongoing dollars? You said, yes, they're ongoing, but they likely are not ongoing indefinitely. But we know that we are going to get this money over a number of years. Can you provide clarification on that? Do you see the questions in the chat?
I have to go and look at them.
It's a one-time block grant.
It's not. I don't think it's a one-time block grant, is what I'm saying. But we don't know how much they're going to give us. So if they give us 323, we don't know how it's going to be allocated. So the governor is doing this block grant. But we don't know how much we're actually going to be receiving. Does that make sense?
No. So go ahead, Vicki.
I was just going to say, then it might just be a typo on the slide, because the slide says it's a one-time grant on slide 11. And so that's why it was confusing.
And then Hannah, and please know that we will circle back and clarify that once we get more information about the term, and we will update the slide accordingly. But Hannah, I see you have your hand up too.
That's fine. If you're going to provide more information, that's probably better. I just was pretty sure that it was not an ongoing allocation like LCFF.
Mm-hmm. We will.
I didn't get the impression that it was a one-time grant.
I don't want us to spend too much time on this one, y'all, because this is an update that we said we're going to provide more information. And as we get more information, we wanted to just make sure you know that there is possible revenue coming and what we know about how much it might be, but also be really clear that we were told not to score it. And so apologize, because this was kind of late breaking news. We wanted to get it to you as soon as possible. So apologize for the errors on the slides. We will update those as well as clarify the terms of the block grant as we get more information.
Right. And it's really unfortunate that we might not actually benefit from this, because if they're only allocating to UPPs with 50% or more, we wouldn't get that. So, but of course, if everybody gets a 323 per 80, we could possibly get 3 million. So we'll clear up some of the information that we have here. But it is, my understanding is it's ongoing, and I will clarify that in the slides or in upcoming meetings. Any other questions before I move on?
Go ahead. Next slide, Vivian.
Next slide, Vivian.
The transition us, Pauline. So that was the governor's update. We're now going to move in towards the part of the conversation where we talk about moving towards our target, reminding everybody, introducing to you, Jessica, that we have some core values of resource allocation in BUSD, and those are on the left side of the screen. And then we also have kind of a set of strategies that we go through in no particular order, really, to employees as we think about making budget reductions. So the right side of the screen is not about budget revenues, even though we know as we talk about moving towards our target, we're looking at how to generate revenue as well as how to cut expenses. But that right side just kind of gives us an idea or some guiding frameworks, if you will, as we go through the process of reducing expenses. Next slide. And so want to remind you all, because even after our last meeting, folks go back and report out, and I'm so happy that you're doing your job as committee members by doing that, two-way communication and taking back what you learn to your various school sites or committees. But I want to make sure that I stress that anything that has happened to date is not a decision, because there was some confusion around that I heard from some stakeholders. We are just bringing to you and exploring as a committee possible reductions. Our next step will be then to think about which of those reductions are viable. And viable is going to be determined by a number of factors, including the impact, the ways that it aligns to our community, et cetera. So we are still very much in the green part of this funnel, thinking about possibilities and holding in mind the entire time that we need to be equitable in all of our decisions and equitable in our recommendations, as well as transparent. And so needed to say that again, because there were some points of confusion in some of the share outs. Next slide. What we had said that we would do, one of the first steps that districts do are to really look internally and I have my team look at their department budgets, their staffing allocations, and even think about protocols and processes that may be inefficient or might be costing us more dollars than we want to put out. And so we have done that. We gave you some proposals and recommendations or considerations, based on that. And we've done it more since our last meeting. Next slide, please, Ms. Vivian. And so I want to remind you that when we met with you all last time, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, we shared some proposals, and the areas of our strategies that we found these possible savings in were evaluating removing vacant positions. We found approximately $369,000 if we were to remove some of those vacancies. We also were able to eliminate some expenses that were covered in other funding sources to the tune of approximately $160,000. And when we also started to look at and explore consolidating or reducing positions and programs to the tune of about $762,000. I want to remind you that as a courtesy and to make sure that folks are informed about possible reductions, first, we did not share with you all the positions or the programs that we were considering to get to the $762,000. Approximately those efforts totaled about 1.3 thousand in reductions. And on the next slide, Ms. Vivian, I'm going to let Pauline quickly remind us all of what those kind of entailed. And she's going to do it quickly because it's just review, because what she hopes to get to next is our next phase of recommendations and where those came from and what those total. So with that, Pauline, you want to remind them of phase one?
Okay. So as Anika mentioned, we looked at considerations just in total, and we scored the total at the bottom, $1.5 million, but not all of that impacted the general fund. So on the next slide, we did an update in terms of how much would actually benefit the general fund, what's ongoing, what's one time. And then we looked at the impact on other funds as well. So you can see that at this point, we're looking at about $1.3 million in phase one. That's going to benefit the general fund on an ongoing basis. And the other ones will impact either BSEP, BERA, or other funds. So this is an update to what I presented before. Anybody has any questions? No questions? Okay, so we can go to the next slide.
Vicki?
I do have a question. Are we going to get that additional information after March 15th when those pink slips have gone out, or when will we get the more specifics of that 700,000?
So yes, as the staff
are
informed and we have more information about programs, we will definitely be coming back to this committee and being more transparent about what's entailed in that 700 and something. Yes.
Okay, so you want to do the next one?
Yeah, just again, so that the last time we came to you again, we looked at some removal of vacant positions. We looked at how we can consolidate and reduce positions and programs and eliminate some expenses that can be covered in other places. We still scrub and see if we can continue to get some savings from those efforts. What we're bringing to you this afternoon is approximately 1.1 million that we've identified as revenue reductions by truing up program costs. We're going to come and share with you now in the second phase what those 1.1 million entails, and then we also have another possible revenue generator that Pauline is going to share with you. So before going to the next slide where Pauline's going to talk about that $1.1 million, I'm going to pause for you, Ms. Beatrice.
It's about the equity and belonging directors as a position that's currently filled or not filled, and how do you intend to address the equity and belonging position and responsibilities?
Mm-hmm. So the equity and belonging director is currently a vacancy, and so that actually, yes, is one of the vacancies that we had added to the list, Ms. Beatrice, for that phase 1 reduction when we looked at removing and evaluating vacant positions. Everything is a trade-off to the point we made earlier. So what Ms. Beatrice is pointing out is that role had a number of responsibilities, including thinking about our affinity spaces, thinking about how to make sure to really target our most marginalized students, as well as various programs, and then a number of other responsibilities that one might not think intuitively goes under the role of equity or director of equity. We still do not have a person in that role. So currently, a number of those responsibilities that were under that title have been divvied up to other departments. That person was actually over our RTI, or our response to intervention coaches. That person was over our ethnic studies work. And so though that position isn't filled, those bodies of work are still happening. They're just under the supervision of, for example, our curriculum and instruction director. So first part of the answer is that some of that work has already been being held by others. I will be transparent about the challenge of then maintaining and managing the various affinity setting structures that we have, not all, but some of them, as well as some of the heritage months, et cetera. That was a key part of the role of this director. That work too has been divvied out, but we are small, but we're a mighty but small team, and so there's not as many folks to hold those various buckets. And so as we think about eliminating this position permanently, at least for a time, you are right, Ms. Beatrice, that we are going to have to ask ourselves the hard questions of how do we make sure that those buckets of work continue to be handled. That said, my personal philosophy and belief is that equity should not be any one person's role. And so part of my leadership is really thinking about how do we incorporate and consider equity and the equity work in all of our purviews and all the work we do. Easier said than done, but just short answer is I don't have the answer to and then how we replace or how we do all those things, but it is something that we have been thinking about and talking about, and in some ways doing as the position is currently not filled. But it's real, and the purpose of that role or that position was to address a need. So we are going to have to think about how we still address that need going forward, particularly if we eliminate the position altogether.
Yes, just because of the climate that we're in and the elimination of those kinds of positions, I think it's a stronger position for the district to take to make a statement to that we're not giving that up, even though this position is not there. So it's just in the climate that we're in. That's why I wouldn't want this to be misunderstood.
No, appreciate that. And that is you're right. That is a good, as you're thinking about transparency, that's just a good talking point. Like we know, and in particular, that we continue to hold up that work, even in this climate, if not more so in this climate, even absent of that position. But how do we make sure that message is heard and felt by the families and students that we serve? So thank you for bringing that up. Any more questions about the phase 1 proposals? Okay, so it's good, y'all. We coming back with and here's some other places where we might be able to recoup some money or to lower our expenses. So with that, Pauline, you want to go ahead and talk about that 1.1?
Oh, sure. So on the next slide, Vivian, can we go to the next slide? So by way of background, for those of you who are not familiar with our teacher transfer from BSEP, this is a staffing model that we use that comes up where the general fund actually pays for all classroom staffing and BSEP supplements this staffing. They transfer about a third of our staffing to us by the teacher template. So I've been working closely with Kathy in terms of the formulas that we're using. The general fund usually staffs at 34-1, and then BSEP will buy it down to various class sizes. However, in conjunction with Kathy, and I know Kathy has talked to the PNO, Planning and Oversight Committee, about this in their meeting. We looked at if we were to buy down class sizes from 36-1, what would that mean to the general fund and to BSEP? So we did the teacher template, did the calculations. We got our projections from Francisco from our enrollment office, and we use that as a basis to come up with the calculation of the teacher transfer. So when we did our calculation, buying down from 36-1, the BSEP will actually be contributing $1.3 million more than they contributed this year, predominantly because of the increased class size that they're buying down from. Does anybody have any questions about that? I know we have a lot of veterans on the team, but we also may have some new members who may have some questions. Are we seeing any hands? Yes, Natasha.
Can you? Okay. Hi, just wanted to chime in as the former BSEP director that this calculation does not mean that our class sizes are increased. It simply means that the contribution from BSEP is increased. And we have, at various points in the past, made adjustments to what the BSEP contribution versus the general fund contribution was. And the general fund at various points has had more stresses upon it, and there have been times when BSEP has had more stresses upon it. But at this point, it sounds like the BSEP fund balance for HQI, high quality instruction, which is the class size reduction fund, can sustain this. That's my understanding. Would that be correct, Pauline?
That's totally correct. And if Kathy wants to chime in, or Vicky wants to chime in, Vicky's a yes.
I can just add that is that's confirmed. We did present this to the P&O last night, and we updated our fiscal model for our Measure H, which is year one next year, and we can sustain this change within the budget next year and potentially ongoing, but it would be something that we would assess annually. And as Natasha mentioned, there may be a time when we have stressors on BSEP sooner than expected, and we may need to revert back to the 34-1. We did do that as recently as 2 years ago. We went back to the 34-1 because BSEP needed the funds to land in or end in a positive position at the end of this current measure E1. So I'll turn it over to Vicky if you have any comments to add. Thank you.
It's 1 point. Oh, well, Beatrice had a question in the chat, and Vicky, you had a question?
No, I was just going to say that it's 1.3 million increase, and it's not really based on a percentage. It's just changing the ratio.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Beatrice, does that answer your question?
How much of an increase is it from last year for this year?
1.3 million.
Oh, okay.
That's why we're scoring it towards as a budget as a budget balancing solution, because it's going to give us an additional $1.3 million. Any other questions? So the teacher template not only tells us how much we're going to get as a contribution from BSEP, it also tells us what our classroom staffing would be in terms of total FTE. So when we looked at our FTE, we are going to be providing, let's see, about probably another 2.08 teachers increase. So the general fund, even though we're getting this increased contribution from BSEP, we will then have to use to pay more for classroom teachers. So that's why I've reduced the amount that we're getting from BSEP by the $273,000. So the net impact is $1.1 million, which is what was on the previous slide that I have now explained. So can I see there any other questions? Is Anika coming back? Anika, so I can take us. Oh, did you want to close this out and then look at the other section, or do you want me to continue?
I mean, since you called me back, I was trying to eat a little soup, Pauline. I'm trying to get better. I've been here with my cameras off because I got some really good coconut lemon soup. Again, this was we're closing the window on this part of the agenda where, again, we came to you all with some new proposals or considerations for budget reductions. As you just heard, our teacher template and our work with BSEP has possibly yielded an additional 1.1. And so if there are no more questions just about what was shared, that one update, we're going to just transition to the next part of our agenda. Vicki?
Yeah, what is the second section on that slide, the 1.5 million that says increase in ADA? Did you mention that?
No, that's what we're getting ready to discuss.
Oh, okay, we're going to discuss it now. Okay.
And Anika just mentioned it.
Okay.
Vicki?
So, okay, we're going to transition to the next part. Okay, so now, Vicki, we are moving into, again, as we think about moving towards our target, we hold two things in mind. We think about how to reduce revenues, but also how to how to reduce expenses, but also how to generate or increase revenues. And so that is the part of the presentation that we're moving to. I'm going to ask Ms. Vivian to click 2 times. One more time. And then I'm going to, again, give it to Pauline. Likes me to do all the transitions. I'm going to give it back to Pauline because she's going to share with you a new, something this is our first time sharing with you, an opportunity for us to possibly generate some revenues as we think about our enrollment projections. So Pauline?
Right. So I've framed this as phase 2. So Vicki, you were right. It's the same exact slide that we have before, but we're just kind of trying to orient everybody about a different approach. So one was a teacher template, was a staffing maneuver. This is now looking at revenues. And to look at revenues, we always look at our enrollment, and our enrollment informs our ADA, and our ADA informs our LCFF funding. So when we're looking at our projections from Francisco that we used to build the teacher template, there was an increase of about 138 in students, and 138 in enrollment corresponds to about 121 in ADA based on our ADA or consistent ADA to enrollment to ADA percentage, which is about 94.8%. So with this additional 121 ADA, we get about 130,000 per ADA in our LCFF. And this is just an average across all grades. So with that calculation, that's how we get the $1.6 million. It's a straight calculation of an average amount per ADA with the increased ADA that we're looking at in terms of projections. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Or if you have any questions.
I'm looking at Vicki's face. I'm looking at Vicki's face. Only because I can only see like 4 faces on the screen, and Vicki's is one of them. I'm seeing her face. It was not straightforward, Pauline.
Okay, I'm going to ask a clarifying question.
Okay.
So the current projection given by Francisco that we used for the 25-26 teacher template already had a calculation of an increase of 138 students.
So he gives us that enrollment, and we base our calculation in the teacher template
Right.
Yeah.
And
So,
that
yeah,
was increased, and we based the template on that increase, but we
yeah.
hadn't accounted for the revenue for that increase anywhere else. This is our first time accounting for that revenue.
Right, right. So
Okay.
we
Okay.
would account for it when we're actually building and constructing the 25-26 budget.
Okay.
But because it's going to be it's going to inform our target, we're kind of like, it's kind of giving us a real good opportunity to actually start building and working on our 25-26 budget earlier, because we have to do our ADA to enrollment chart, and then so we're tying everything together.
And it's not super important to answer right now, but is a large percent of that the 2 increases in TK, or is it just across the board increases?
I would say it was TK. Sam is on this call as well. TK had an increase, and
it's an increase at TK, and then it's the bubble moving through the grade levels. There's a little bit of an increase also at the high school level.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So phase 2, and I'm kind of phasing it just to kind of like keep us oriented in terms of what we've done before and what's new. So what we're looking at is a 3.9 total. This bubble gives us a 2.7. So we're at about $3.9 million at this point in proposed ongoing general fund budget balancing solutions. So this does not include the block grant. It doesn't include anything. This is just what we have right now based on what we brought to you last week and what we've now done based on staffing formula and then looking at enrollment to ADA and impact on LCFF funding. Any questions? So we can go to the next slide if there are no more questions.
So this one, friends, we are revisiting, and I want to be really clear to say this. We know that we came to you all last meeting with a possible revenue generator in the form of charging for transportation. And again, nothing decided, nothing final. We wanted to get your feedback, and we got a lot of feedback and a lot of feelings about the possibility of charging for transportation. And so we've definitely recorded and note the various feedback that we got regarding that, but we want to come back to you again, not to say that we're doing it, but to provide some additional information that may or may not inform or influence your feedback and your response to the idea of charging for transportation as a generator going forward. So with that, next slide, Vivian, I'm going to mute and let it go, Pauline.
All right. So what I brought back was a justification from the Ed Code for charging transportation. Again, this is just a proposal. This is something that we can discuss further. Nothing is carved in stone, but we know that we're allowed to charge. This is a link to the code section, and then I kind of pulled out some relevant points in terms of when can we charge fees. So we can charge fees to help offset the cost of transportation. We can use it as a source of revenue. And if we believe that transportation is necessary, practical, and economical. So we're not looking at the whole esoteric justification for transportation in Berkeley. We're just exploring what's in the Ed Code in terms of what we can charge. Is it allowable? And also in the code section, it mentions that our students with exceptional needs, which would be our special ed students, or unduplicated pupils, would not be charged for transportation. So next slide. So the next slide has some data that we obtained from the transportation department, but this is prior year ridership. So we looked at the total number of students that actually in 23-24, this is the ridership for home to school transportation. And I singled out just the elementary because when we're offering it to high school or middle school, that's usually an unusual circumstance. And I think Sean is in the meeting. Sean can probably elaborate. But this is just a scenario that I'm sharing with you. And then the discussion was, what if we charged students $1 a day? How much money would we actually bring in? And then there was some discussion that the last time, is it worth the additional work and blah, blah, blah. So this is just an effort for us to kind of say, well, if we charged $1 a day, we would look at the total general ed students. We would take out the ones that weren't associated with an elementary school. And then we would estimate what the UPP is, because transportation does not have unduplicated pupil information in their database. We'd have to do a VLOOKUP. But even if we estimate that we have 100 students, charging $1 a day will net us about $261,000. Again, this is very rough. This is prior year data, and the UPP is estimated. So, but 261 is what we're looking at. So possibly for budgeting, we could say 250,000 just to be conservative. Questions? Yes, Beatrice.
Yes, having had this conversation a couple of years ago on the school board, there are after-school programs also that are not at school sites. Would this also be charging to the transportation to the after-school programs? Would it be
no, Miss Beatrice, you're jumping ahead.
Going ahead.
That's it. You're going ahead.
That's where it's going.
Yeah. So this is just a home to school. So what we had taken to the board before was charging the after school programs, and that was like, I remember that only too well. It was a very painful experience. Again, this is just preliminary, $1 a day, because other districts charge for transportation. It's allowed in Ed Code. And Dan has raised his hand. So Dan,
just also concerned.
Sorry, Beatrice. I thought you were through.
Just also the concern for the families who are free, reduced, and you know.
So they would not be charged. They're excluded from the calculation. Okay. So we have to get the actual number, but we would do a VLOOKUP in terms of identifying these students and then calculating what we think it would be and is it worth exploring. This is just for discussion purposes. So Dan?
So what are the costs of collecting $200 from each of them? So, I mean, it strikes me that...
On my third slide, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
All right. I'm with you. Step at a time. So, any questions about these assumptions? Okay, next slide. So this is what Beatrice was referring to. So Beatrice, remember back in the day, we tried to exclude the groups that were going to the City of Berkeley programs. It was a complete disaster trying to come up with a costing formula. But if we're just looking at $1 a day, the number of students that are actually going to the after school programs, if we charged $1 a day, and again, you remember this is prior data, we're looking at about 96,000, close to 100,000. If we charged for kids going to the after school program. So remember, a lot of these students are not eligible for home to school transportation. We drop them off at these various programs just because the bus is going right by some of these programs. And in some cases, we actually do have buses that go to the after school programs. We have an expert in the room if anybody has any questions or if you need to elaborate. Sean, you're here, right? Is Sean here?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. So correct me, Sean. So I'm just again, this is just for discussion. So so chime in at any time, Sean.
Yeah, you're actually explaining it very well. also, but if anybody
Oh,
has any additional questions, I can elaborate if they need it.
thanks,
Vicky,
Sean. Appreciate it.
thank you for coming,
Yes,
Sean.
Vicky.
Vicky?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm. So, like, let's take Malcolm X, for example. On the first slide, the number of students was 170. On this slide, the number is 120. Does that mean that 290 students total ride the bus, or is this 120 part of the 170?
It could be one part of the 170.
Okay,
So
so
these are so if you have a kid that's eligible for home to school, you may end up and go to an after school program, you'll be paying $2 for that kid.
Okay, so I would just argue that I think this would be very hard for parents to swallow, that not only are they paying for their student to ride the bus, but then their after school program is also being charged for their student to ride the bus
No,
there.
so I may have misspoke. The parents will pay this fee,
Oh, the
not the
parents.
after.
Okay. So then the parents would be paying $2. Okay.
If they have a kid.
If they're okay, so that's a little bit different, I think, than what we talked about last time. Is that instead of charging the programs, we would be charging the parents to go to it.
Yeah.
And then I would just reiterate my point was that parents also will say, well, we would be happy to be in Learns, but there's no space. We've been on a
Yes,
waiting
right.
list for 4 years. The
Right.
other comment I wanted to make on the last slide, one back, was that the UPP is our free and reduced lunch students, correct?
Free and reduced and
foster and
foster
okay,
and
unduplicated. So I would say that because don't we have a 30% rate in our district, it's at 30%, and so only
right.
counting 100 students, I feel like those are students who are more likely to take the bus. We should at least use the 30%, and that would be 400 students that would not qualify.
Actually, I beg to differ because the 30% is across the entire district. This is just our elementary schools.
I see. Okay.
So that's why I'm being conservative. It's not we don't offer transportation to middle and high schools.
But it would still be, isn't it still an average of 30% of the elementary kids?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I thought of that at one point, but I think that's why I said it's to be confirmed.
Okay.
So this is a very rough estimate. It's prior year data. It's very we would have to do a VLOOKUP because, as I mentioned, we can't.
Right, I understand that, but I think that a difference between 100 versus 400 does make a big dollar difference. And I would guess that it's closer to 400, but I trust you, and I just wanted to bring that point up.
You may be completely correct. I may be lowballing that number.
Okay.
So that's why probably we would earn 250 to 260. This is just to give us a ballpark to kind of, do we move forward? What would be our next steps? So we're bringing the data with the assumptions and what we think the revenue would be.
Thank you so much for collecting this data. It is super helpful. I appreciate you coming back with this data. It's very helpful.
So we have to thank Sean and Sheila and their department. I got all of that information from their ridership data that they collect, and as I mentioned, they have this huge spreadsheet with every student that rides a bus and all the information. So thanks Transportation for sharing this with us, and I know Sean's going to give us current year information as she gets it. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. So on the next slide, Vivian.
I'm sorry, one more question, just one more comment. Does this not include also the summer? Because we use transportation in the summertime also for students to summer school.
Sean can probably answer.
I would probably say no, Pauline, to that, because most of our students in the summer are through the special education department.
Oh, okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi. I have two questions around this. I guess the first question is, how do we know $1 a day is the right amount?
We don't. That was other districts had come up with a. Can I just finish this presentation and then we can I'll take questions. Thanks, Daniel. So on this slide, it has, I think it's going to answer Dan's question and Daniel's question. So we're proposing $1 a day just because in other districts, our previous transportation manager, that was what they charged in the district that she came from. So if we did $1 a day for eligible riders, we're looking at total potential revenue of $350 with our after school and our home to school. But if we're charging $2 a day, that obviously will be twice that amount, right? And this addresses Dan's concern. We may need to add staff, so we wouldn't recognize. And again, this is for discussion, for lively discussion, and just we've thought of all the details and bringing it to you for additional discussion. So we would need to add at least an additional 0.5 FTE to collect and track and the information, the data, the funds. So we wouldn't recognize necessarily everything that we put in as a potential revenue increase. We would have to offset it with some costs that would be incurred as well. Dan, does that address your concern?
It does.
Okay, thank you. Daniel.
Yeah, so I guess the second part of the question is really about if we're concerned at all about the equity that cost brings to bear. I mean, cost is a primary driver of friction.
Hold on one sec.
Sorry, Dan, were you trying to say something?
No, I'm
okay. No worries.
You're multitasking.
All good.
Trying to mute.
I didn't know if you were trying to mute that. I was like, yeah, okay. So yeah, I mean, cost is a primary driver of friction, which is something that will be an issue for people. So figuring out if cost is the right way to do it, and if so, what the right amount is. You know, these seem kind of like swags to me, and so I guess I'd want to have a more nuanced understanding of like if it's even fair to levy costs, the mechanics of how we would do this, because this is about the coordination. But like, is this something, I'm assuming this isn't like a kid getting on the bus and sticking $1 in the till type thing.
No.
Yeah, because that would be.
I would assume we would do it like at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And it's like 181. If the kids riding the bus, this is what it is. So transportation has an incredibly difficult task to provide transportation. It's not straightforward, and they do a great job in terms of tracking the kids, monitoring the kids, doing the routing. Sean, who's on our call, does the routing. We have new software, which I think is helpful in terms of Yazid. Yazid just joined. So I want to express my thanks to the Transportation Department. Every year, they have a proposal for us, whether it's freezing drivers, looking at additional revenue. We tried it 3 years ago, right, Beatrice, when we were trying to charge after-school programs. So transportation is always being very innovative in terms of coming up with solutions. We discuss them and we decide what can we move forward. That I understand your position in terms of introducing costs. This is, again, something that we're considering and sharing it with the group. Any other questions or comments?
For me, I do.
Oh, sorry, Beatrice, I didn't see it. Yes.
Yes. I just think that, this will be a strong pushback from a lot of parents who say, I would like to go to the school that's right across the street from me, that's 2 blocks away. And, let me do that because I don't want my child going across town. We have a lot of parents, and this would actually possibly, we'll get a lot of families. The school board will get a lot of families to push back on this, and which, it does. Well, so many families I've known that have their kids, they live right across the street or a block away, and they are going across town to another school. So
Right. Were you here last week at the last meeting, Beatrice? Because we had a discussion about neighborhood schools versus our whole integration program versus the demographics of Berkeley. So it's like a whole question of why transportation. What has changed. I know when it was introduced, it was very necessary, and of course, in this climate, we want to be mindful that we're being sensitive to everybody's needs. So it's part of a larger discussion, but I was able to put some numbers to the ideas that we floated in the last meeting, just for information and for discussion purposes.
I also think that the parents in our communities need to know in advance, this is just a consideration, it's not a decision, so that you have filtered this out with families already in the PTAs, in the school sites, that this is something that is being considered, no decisions being made on it. Because the more you get that out, then, and also how much of a gap the school district is trying to fill with additional revenue. For me personally, I don't think it's worth the grief that you're going to get, the school district will get, and the collection, because you will have difficulty. We don't charge for anything else. And so.
But we also aren't in a shortfall of $7 million year over year. I mean, we're in critical fiscal times. So I think we have to start looking at the district a little differently. And it's certainly not business as usual. I'm just playing devil's advocate. But yeah, I understand, Beatrice. I totally get it. But remember, this is not scored. This is not going on the sheet. And even if it does make it on the sheet, everybody has an opportunity to vote, yay, nay, or whatever. So this is, again, just for discussion purposes. Natasha and then Matt.
Hi, I just wanted to second some of the concerns that Beatrice raised, while at the same time, definitely, of course, appreciating what you're doing by looking for across many areas to see where there might be some revenue opportunities. But I think I'm still feeling somewhat scarred from the time, what was it, 2019, when we tried this before, and also concur that I think you may have families who would, are not happy about being bused, even if they understand the history of busing and the rationale, but then that they have to pay additionally. And so, doing sort of a cost benefit of, is this really going to make a big enough dent that we can weather the unhappiness that's going to be voiced at all of the school board meetings? Obviously, no one's going to be happy with everything we do, but I think it might be a cost benefit discussion to be had. I'm not adding much more than what she said, but just wanted to second what she said.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. Yeah, I really remember that was a brutal experience. But it wasn't a flat fee. We were trying to justify a cost for the after-school programs only, and that was not enjoyable. But Matt has his hand. Matt has raised his hand.
I just say two things. One is we pay for transportation to go on field trips. We're already paying in various ways that no one really knows in order to use the buses that the district has. The other thing I wanted to say is that, of course, these are trade-offs, right? And so, if this was positioned as in, we're generating $700,000 and that saved, the cooking and gardening program or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very different conversation, right? So I think viewing this only through what does it mean to generate revenue, but not also what does it mean to save and what are we saving in terms of program in the district.
Right. Thanks, Matt. That's great. Yeah. Ooh, who did that clapping hand? I don't see the clapping hand. I think I'm going to do it.
Oh, please don't look for the clapping hand. Please do not touch any buttons, Holly.
Oh, wait. I just saw the clapping hand. Sorry.
I appreciate Matt for saying that. That again isn't that's at that slide 6 or something where we talk about there's no solutions, that there are only trade-offs. We have to keep this in mind, even though we're chunking these conversations out of revenue generators or reductions, et cetera. The totality of the conversation has to be about, one, our decision to continue to move towards our mission and serve all of our students aligned to our 4 E's and those values of core resource whatever they are, the core resource allocation values, but also really holding the entire conversation, y'all, that these is all about trade-offs, and none of it's going to be easy or simple, or things that we just want to do, right? They're also going to be things that we're going to really have to thoughtfully engage our community around. And so this is the first step where these ideas get to percolate and be tested and tried. But know that if we, as a committee or as a group, decide to move even a little bit further with any of these recommendations, particularly those that impact families immediately, we will definitely have a thoughtful engagement process. Now, Vicki, I see your hand. Vicki, are you about to weigh in on transportation costs? Okay,
Yes, it's about transportation costs. I would.
It's gonna be a quick one, only because
it's very quick. It's very quick. Okay, I would just say that rather than charging parents at the beginning of school year, I would hope that we would maybe do something like charge them monthly, because it will impact PTA fundraising as well for parents to have like a $400 or $500 bill in the very beginning. And PTA does fund a lot of things that the district can't fund. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, Vicki.
Okay, friends, the window is closing for this particular possible revenue generator because we got a couple more we want to share with you, and we want to, at the very least, point you in the direction of where you can see the responses to the data and information that you asked for. But Jesse never raises their hand, so Jesse, I'm gonna one more time. What you got for us, Jesse?
I'm going to go really quick, but I just want to add to this conversation that buses are only available to people who already live 1.5 miles from the school. So it's already only the people that are far from their school. So I just want to make sure we're thinking about that in this conversation. It's not anybody can take the bus. You already have to live far from your school to be eligible at all. So we're kind of double charging the people who are assigned to schools far from their houses, and that they have to go across town and then they're getting charged. So I just want to make sure we're thinking about that too.
Thank you.
Well, there's a correction there, Jesse. Like Rosa Parks families will be transported across university. So, and that's not 1 mile to the James Kinney Park.
Oh, I don't mean for the after school programs, just for the home to school.
Home to school. Yeah, that makes
now, not for real this time. I'm not even being friendly. We are closing this one. Ready? Because you got to hear about some of these other ones, and you have a lot of information that you requested. Okay, Pauline, ready?
Yeah.
Ms. Vivian, click fast before somebody raises their hand. So, and then look at Ms. Vivian. Ms. Vivian, click fast before somebody raises. There we go. Okay, so another possible generator, not popular, but something that, I've been in education for 20 something years, comes up all the time, or oftentimes when conversations about budget reductions come up. And so I want to introduce this idea to you all and explain it to you. This is the first pass at this one, so I really want to hear your thoughts about it. Pauline, is this you or is this Sam? Sorry.
I can do this one.
Okay.
So next slide. So actually no, let's go back to the other one.
Okay, go back.
Yeah. So this is a possible budget balancing solution that we've actually introduced about 3 years ago, when we had to cut, I don't remember how many million, those of us who were
It was almost
math.
5 years ago, Pauline.
It was
2020. It was during the middle of COVID.
When Brent was here?
Yeah.
2019, 2020. Yeah.
This was with the pandemic, and no one knew what.
Yeah. Wow.
And there was
Time
a really
flies.
large target in a very short time frame.
Right, and so thanks for the correction. This was in January. We had a rosy, okay budget. May revise, it was doom and gloom, and we had to make serious cuts. So this was proposed at that point. I don't think we've revisited it, but I think it's a sign of the times that we're now, we're not the only district. At our CBO meeting, pretty much most of the districts are looking at furlough days. So some points to remember: it is a mandatory unpaid day off. It cannot happen on an instructional day. So I think we have 4 non-instructional days, Sam, when we discuss this. And it will be a one-time savings. It would only be a savings for the year that we actually implement the furloughs. So not a popular budget balancing solution, but something that we may need to consider. So I'm providing a little bit of, yes, Matt?
I was just gonna comment, but I can wait.
Yeah, let me just share. Let me share some data. One data point I don't have that I wanted to share with you, but on the next slide, if we close the district for a day, what would that actually mean in terms of savings? So across all units, if we closed it and all funds, we're looking at $825,000. This is all funds, all resources, all units. So it's $825,000 per day. On the next slide, our focus is the unrestricted general fund. So if we looked at the unrestricted general fund, the savings for one day would be $479 across all bargaining groups, represented and non-represented. The next slide is actually under construction, which is the one that that would provide a lot more information. But we were working on trying to massage our data to just pull out the 12-month employees, because that's an area that we would probably focus on. So we would need to see with the 12-month employees by bargaining group, by funding source, what would that look like? So I don't have that for you today, but staff is working on that and I can share it at the next meeting. But as I mentioned, 800 and something across the entire district. General fund one day would say 479. And we have 4 days available, non-instructional days that may be considered. It's not, nothing is being proposed at this time. We're just kind of floating this idea and providing data.
Can you go to the previous slide, Ms. Vivian, please? The previous, sorry, one more. Yes. So again, just wanted to kind of reiterate that this one is showing the impact of 1 day of furlough across all of our labor partners and bargaining units, just from our unrestricted general fund. However, what you might recall is when Pauline first opened up this section and talked about furlough days, not only did she say that they were only one-time savings, so savings for the year that the furloughs happened, but she said cannot happen on an instructional day. And so what we know is that what the implications of that is or are is that our educators, our classroom teachers, our certificated BFT line would likely then, and Pauline and Sam and Matt, please correct me if I say anything incorrectly, would not likely not be amongst the group that we consider for furloughs, because we cannot touch instructional days. And we do know that we're moving into a pretty robust curriculum adoption, et cetera. And already as it is, we don't have enough days to collaborate and plan and get our classroom teachers ready to do the work, the important work that they do every day. And so with there being only about 4 days that are non-instructional, that our classroom teachers work, we would, as we come back to you with more information, it is likely that we're coming back to you with more information that doesn't necessarily include that group, which is why Pauline said that what's under construction is us looking at those of us who are 12-month employees, year-round employees, who work not just instructional days, but also non-school or non-instructional days. And we'll be bringing back information about what it would look like to have furlough days for folks who fall into that category across different labor groups. I hope I didn't confuse folks more, but I wanted to just add that piece so folks won't spend 5 minutes talking about why we can't or shouldn't. So with that, Matt has to say, and then we'll go to Vicky. Matt?
Vicky?
I was just going to add one thing that is even different than before, is that the state has added a ton of trainings that are mandatory that didn't used to be there. So even the ability to not even have these days, let alone the with adoption and everything else going on, has really shrunk because these are mandatory trainings that have to happen during the day. So thanks.
Even when we come back, if this is something that folks want to explore more, that 479 is going to be a lot smaller of a number in terms of potential revenue or savings, if you will. Vicky?
not knowing the in and outs of how public school is, money and whatnot, when I worked at a private college and we were in a budget crisis, we had mandatory vacation days, which was different than a furlough because the vacation salaries were having to be set aside and people were accumulating them and that money was not being used. Is there anything like that is similar where we can enforce like a vacation day or something like that and use vacation pay for a day for everybody?
So Vicky, just in the interest of keeping moving forward, I'm going to write down notes and I'll bring back information in the next meeting.
Okay.
But there are a lot of things that reasons why that won't work in a school district, but we'll bring back all that info.
Thank you.
So we're going to go with Natasha, and then if you all don't mind, we're going to close this one and come back, because again, this was just like a little teaser preview. It's still under construction. Next slide, please, Ms. Vivian. It's still under construction.
Oh,
So
it does say one more time.
Go back one more. Yeah, right there. So there's a lot more we're going to come back. Yes, I am. So Natasha, while Ms. Natasha is making her comment or asking her question, Ms. Vivian, we had to make a change mid-meeting, so I'm going to ask that you stop sharing and refresh your deck, and then reshare the deck starting back at this slide 37, please. Thank you. Ms. Natasha?
Yes, just quickly thinking back to the furlough discussion that we had back in June of 2020. I was just going back into my notes, and one of the things that we looked at was doing something equitably so that rather than, everybody a day, that impacts people who are lower earners more emphatically than those who are in a higher tier. So Sam and Pauline may remember this, but at least at one point we did float an idea of looking at salary levels and doing a furlough based on salary levels. In the end, we ended up not doing it. I think if memory serves, it was around then that I had proposed the BSEP teacher template adjustment, and that got us about 1.2 million. That was part of the factor for not doing furloughs. But we did look at a different formula than just everybody a day, but looking at earnings.
Right, and I think actually I think we looked at cabinet we looked at like cabinet, and we looked at different levels, and then so the 12 months would kind of get us somewhat there, but I think the idea is for us to kind of look at different groups, and determine what we should do or how we can do it so it's equitable. Somewhat equitable.
I raised my hand.
Go ahead, Matt, because nobody can see
Matt has his hand raised.
I just say, just as a, so for everyone who's new here and wasn't part of the 2020 discussion, except for things like cabinet or like high-level director positions, anything involving furloughs would have to be negotiated with each union, and that is an important hurdle to jump over. So I just wanted to, for the record, make sure everyone was aware of that.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, Ms. Vivian, go ahead and push share, and here we go. Furloughs. Window of opportunity is closed for now. We'll reopen it again in another meeting. We're going to come back with more information, as well as incorporate the information or considerations that folks just shared. So thank you for that feedback. We are actually, I don't know why this is completely out of order. So we are now done with our potential generators. We are, well, maybe kind of not. Okay, we're going to talk to you about LEAP. And LEAP is actually a twofer. It actually could be considered a possible generator, maybe, or a reduction, but it also was specifically brought to you all for this meeting because it was in response to a request for information that was made by committee members at the previous meeting. So as I get Jill ready to share with you information about LEAP, next slide, please, Ms. Vivian. There's no recommendation or no consideration for this necessarily. This is really just responding to you information, and I will put this in the order of the deck appropriately after the meeting is over. But this was specifically a request from you all. So Jill's going to come on and just introduce what LEAP is and give you some more information about the program, but it's just for information purposes. Go ahead, Jill.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. And also just want to acknowledge that there are some folks on this call who have much deeper experience with LEAP than I do, and we're actually there at the beginning of LEAP. So the LEAP program, for those of you who don't know, LEAP stands for Learn, Engage, Accelerate, and Persist. It's a component of our U9 programming at Berkeley High School. To support students in their academic and social emotional development by providing what we call a LEAP class. So the LEAP class enrollment is kept small intentionally, no more than 12 students. Students are identified as they matriculate from our middle schools into our high school to see which students would benefit from some small group attention in this intervention class. There's some additional information that was provided to P&O last spring that's linked there on that slide, but the funding for our LEAP classes come from both BSEP and from LCAP, and there's a little bit of history there because it used to be more general fund and LCAP, and then it's moved into LEAP and LCAP, and it's no longer funded by general fund. One of the things that we have been tracking is the enrollment in LEAP class. So there's a next slide there. And because the numbers, if you go ahead and advance the slide, Ms. Vivian, just to enrollment by the numbers, what we've been noticing is we have a few of our LEAP classes that are close to full enrollment. Some have lower enrollment. So we have 7 hives in our U9 program. And what you see in the parentheses there is the count of the number of students enrolled versus the number of spaces that are available for each of those sections. So that is something that we have been looking at, have been in conversations about, and are continuing to explore this particular structure.
Again, this was just a response to a request for information about LEAP. We will likely be coming to you all with more information about LEAP, as well as, as we think about programs that we are evaluating. This is one of many programs of many that we all agree that we would evaluate. So we'll be bringing back more information to you soon, but wanted to just be able to answer that question that was posed at the last meeting, which was what was LEAP and how many students are in LEAP. I also want to note that it's 4:26, and I appreciate all of the folks' thoughtful contributions and comments. The last of these slides are, again, just response to information. And what I'm going to ask staff to do is just to show the slides to you so that you can know that we did respond, and we can circle back and have a little bit more robust conversation about them at our next meeting. But they'll be there for you to even just look at in advance of the next meeting so that you can come with questions. Go ahead, next slide, please, Ms. Vivian. So this is just a reminder, these are some of the things that you all requested information on. Across previous meetings, you've been asking for district paid services for contracts over 50,000 or just contracts in general. The program evaluation that folks have been continuing to ask for, we are still working on that, so that is coming. And at the last meeting in particular, you asked about how much we spend on PD and various budgets, tutoring and other outside programs, classes, and the impact of changing our class sizes and LEAP. This is just to remind you that we do take notes of what you asked for. So the LEAP information we brought to you just today, we're going to be bringing you more. And what we want to share with you in the next couple slides is just some information regarding BUSD contracts. I do believe that, Emily, this is so LEAP, more to come. Next slide. I do believe that the contracts is going to be you, Miss Emily, or you, Miss Pauline. If I
Emily.
am, there you go.
Emily.
Okay, so again, we're not going to have the time to answer tons of questions. This is just us bringing you the information that you asked for. Definitely committing time to being able to answer more questions about this particular slide and the next one at the next meeting. And then we'll close with a reminder about our March 15th notices. Go ahead. Sorry, go back, Ms. Vivian. Sorry. One more. Okay, Emily.
All right, I will give my very quick overview. So there are 2 slides here. They are snapshots of what are contracts that are have been approved and sort of are in process or have already been paid out in this current fiscal year, FY25. So I'm showing you on this first slide here contracts over $10,000 that have that are funded in whole or in part by the unrestricted general fund. So these dollar amounts are the dollar amounts of the entire purchase order that's associated with the contract. There may be situations where we've braided funds from a couple of sources, but in order to get it with this level of detail on the vendors and not have it be a bajillion slides, I've got it rolled up in this way. So this shows you that here are the vendors we contract with, over $10,000 that have at least partial unrestricted general fund funding. And unrestricted general fund, as I'm stating it here, is all of our unrestricted resources. So I do want to flag that that includes resources like LCAP, which have plans and programming associated with it and are in some cases outside of the full scope of SBAC, but they are part of that sort of larger funding group. And then this is object code 5800, so consulting services. And there's just a little footnote with some of those details. So not a perfect explanation of all of the contracts, but a good sort of first look at what are the big areas we contract with. On the next slide, I looked at same parameters, but a different set of funding sources. So I used the unrestricted general fund for the first slide. This slide is one unrestricted resource actually, which is our special ed transportation, which happens to be resource 0240 and was excluded from the previous slide. And the other major resource code is 6500. That's our primary special education funding source. And so this shows all of our contracts in Object 5800. It also shows our non-public agency and non-public school contracts, which we actually have in separate object codes. So again, this is all very high level, and we're happy to explore looking into other areas in more detail, but just in terms of what are the big organizations that we are forming contracts with in this current year, this is sort of a snapshot.
Before we get to your question, Matt, just want to also say that as we're engaging in the various budget reduction strategies and having these internal conversations, not only are we looking at and evaluating the various programs that we offer in BUSD, and those programs both include programs that we partner with contractors or partners to implement, as well as internal programs. But also we are looking at our various contractors and looking at the services that they provide to see if there are redundancies and inefficiencies there as well. And so that level of fine-tooth analysis are happening not just with the different partnerships and programs that we have to serve our students, but also happening with our contracts in partnerships as well. So I wanted to say that again, and as Emily said so well, this is a very high level response to your request for information, but we did want to at least have an initial response. Matt?
I appreciate this. I know we'll talk about this maybe next time, but it would be awesome and maybe not so much work to color code this a little bit. Some of these people are just replacing people who are on leave. Like, you know, some of these are part of like core essential functions of the district, like Frontline is our subsystem, right? And then there are things that are truly, and some of these are MPSs, a lot of these big ones, right? But I think just color coding on like maybe 5 ways, one of them being what is truly discretionary versus what is like part of our operating mechanisms, I think would help. So then we don't have to like talk about 100 lines, right? And
Yeah.
instead we can look at 20. So thank you. If that would be helpful for next time.
Yeah, and that's something that we can easily do. So thank you for that suggestion. We will definitely, when we come back to talk about it more, have those color codes. Any other question? Again, this was just responding to request information. There's a lot more work to do around these contracts and partnerships, and it is 4:32. But I do want to see if there's anyone has any other questions or even recommendations or suggestions about what we do with this data, similar to what Matt just did.
This is an unrelated, this has to do with the target and the block grant. I've confirmed it is one time, it was in the slide. So it's not going to impact our target for 25-26, but it would be for 26-27. I have revised slides that I can put in the deck so you can see what that means in terms of the target for the target of 25-26 remains unchanged, but it will impact the target for 26-27. So I'm going to put revised slides in the deck so that you guys will have that information.
Thank you for responding to that inquiry, Pauline, in real time. Then what we'll do, of course, you'll update those slides, but as we often do, we'll revisit what we talked about at this meeting, at the next meeting, and that'll be an opportunity for her to provide further clarification and answer any questions. Matt and Vicky? Matt first, and Vicky.
Sorry. Thanks for the information, Pauline. I'm just wondering if it's correct to say that if it is one time, what could a strategy be spreading cuts over a 2-year period, because we could reduce the target in year 1 and increase the target in year 2 because we would have money available to spend. I'm just an idea as a
yeah. When we get more information about the actual grant, we can plan strategies around that.
Vicky?
Hopefully we get it. Fingers crossed.
When we come back to rediscuss this, if you could explain why it wouldn't affect 25, 26, why it wouldn't take effect into 26, 27, that would be useful, because even if it's one time, I assumed it would still count for the next school year, but you just said it would be the one after that.
We'd score it for 25, 26, the total amount, but if the grant expires over 2 years, we will do 50% in each
I
year.
see. Okay.
Okay, friends.
And then, Anika, do we want to start having the members kind of come up with ideas that they would like us to explore further? I mean, we've been kind of coming up with a lot of.
So what we're going to do, just because it is 4:35, friends, and we did have some time to get some feedback, let's make that the homework assignment. So, I mean, I know y'all got a whole bunch of ideas. And so what we'll do is space at the next meeting for you all to come with any ideas for either reductions or revenue generation that you want us to explore. Some of that comes out of the request for information that you all make. And so you say, what about this? And we bring information about it. But definitely that is something we want to do. And so thank you for bringing that, Pauline. We're not going to do it now. But if you have ideas for where we can make reductions, or where you would like us to even explore making reductions, and or ideas for generating revenue, please get ready to share that at the next meeting. You also are always open to emailing Vivian, who gives us information in the interim, in between meetings. And so if you have ideas, please feel free to do that, and she will make sure to get those ideas to us even in advance of the next meeting. Really quickly, because we're about to wrap, some of you all have, some of us have other meetings, which is why we made this meeting earlier to begin with. I do want to remind folks that at the last SBAC, Sam did a brief overview of the reduction in force, or the March 15th notices. She talked about the notices, different purposes, and who might receive them, but she also let you all know that at the March 5th meeting, our board will be looking at a resolution that lists the positions and the FTE, not the individual names, of the various positions that we might consider reducing or eliminating. So just wanted to remind you of that. That's coming forth again on March 5th. We have prepared a communication that will be going out to staff to explain this to them as well. But just wanted to circle back, because it is going to become a part, just a time of a lot of emotions. We're already in a time of a lot of emotions, and now we're adding to that. And so you, as members of the advisory committee, should just be aware that is happening. So I wanted to remind you of that. I also want to remind you that our next meeting is on March 12th, and we're going back to our original time, which is 4 to 5:30. Thank you all for coming early this afternoon. There's a number of folks who couldn't make it, so reminding everyone that these meetings are recorded and posted, as well as the deck and any other artifacts on our district SBAC website. I look forward to seeing you on the 12th. If you are having secret meetings to plan on Jill and my surprise birthday party, some secret, we love surprises. But otherwise, I hope to see many of you all at our next board meeting, which is on March 5th. And again, if you have any questions or comments or ideas, you can definitely send it to Ms. Vivian in the interim of in between these two meetings. So appreciate y'all. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, and for the good questions that you asked, but also the good ideas. And ultimately, thank you for just being amazing thought partners for us as we navigate the stormy weather ahead. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, Miss Kathy. Thank y'all.
Bye, Nikia.